For me, it's about be curious, be bold, and take the time to learn.
There is no doubt that 2020 and 2021 will go down as a year to remember. While the COVID-19 pandemic has had an enormous impact, this year has brought many challenges. All of these highlighted the reality of persistent disruptive volatility, and there's no reason to think that volatility will decrease. In fact, it is only likely to increase. Hello and welcome to the Honest Talk by Peak Folks. I'm Harsh Pandey. For this particular session, we have with us very special guest joining us all the way from United Kingdom, Mr. Julien Haye, sir. He joined Fidelity International FIL in July 2017 as head of non-financial risk in London and has over 20 years of experience in the financial industry. In his current role, he partnered with FIL's top management and board, leveraging risk insights to improve the firm's operating model resiliency and scalability and product offering through effective risk management and culture, and continuously to improve the firm clients' outcome and journey. Mr. Julian sir is passionate about people and art and design. For many years, he has led the LGBT diversity and inclusion agenda as a firm he worked for, mentoring young professionals and entrepreneurs to help them to reach their professional potential and supporting non-profit organizations. So first of all, sir, I welcome you to in this session. Thank you so much for joining and agreeing to share your thoughts with us.
Thank you, my pleasure. It's a real pleasure to be here today.
Thank you, sir. It's our pleasure too. So moving to the topic of today's session, which we have chosen is why risk management is more important than ever. Within the last 20 years, we have seen the dot-com crash, the attack of 9/11, and the global war on terror, the global financial crisis, and now this pandemic. Extraordinary events are becoming the norm. So my very first request to you is kindly please explain our viewers why risk management is more important than ever.
Yes, and it's a very broad question, obviously. If I summarize it especially in the current role I'm in, we're here to protect our client and our organization, right? And risk management at the end of the day is about protection and generating value. So when you apply that to the wider society, if we had proper risk management mindsets, my gut feel is that the pandemic as we've known it will have been very different.
Yes.
And people will have reacted also in a very different way. Because it's about proactive thinking. It's not about reacting to a crisis.
Right.
And risk management is really much about that. It's about taking proactive measure, thinking ahead around what could go wrong and getting ready for it whenever it happens. And sometimes we are happy to take certain risks. That's perfectly fine. We are actually all of us are taking risks day in and out, even to go to work, when we go out, when we go to the restaurant, whatever we do, we're taking risk, whether we realize it or not. There are other risks we shouldn't be taking. And because you alluded to the pandemic as a starting point, those were known issues. In fact, for those of you who are interested, Bill Gates made a very interesting TED talk, I think it was in 2016, on the back of the pandemic, not the pandemic, but the epidemic, the Ebola epidemic in Africa. And everything he mentioned at the time are pretty much all the issues we faced this time around. So it's not as if we didn't know, we simply didn't act upon what we had in front of us. And risk management for me is really about that. It's making sure we are ready when something is not going according to plan, or sometimes to say, you know what, we're going to be comfortable if things are not going to plan.
Right. Indeed, sir. I think you have given a very wonderful answer. I'm sure the viewers who are watching this session, they are surely going to find this meaningful as well as insightful. So my next question to you is, we have seen the business world has changed dramatically over the last few decades. Now we live in a connected society where change can be fast-paced, constant, and unpredictable. Rapid advance in technologies have created an environment where the internet, smartphones, and social media are ubiquitous. And the 2008 global financial crisis and this 2020 pandemic, COVID-19, has increased the sense of turbulence, danger, and unpredictability in certain areas. So, in your opinion, what do you believe? What are the kind of skills, what are the critical skills required to excel in this fast changing world?
Well, I think the first thing is to be resilient to change, because the reality is that you can't control it. So change, especially in the world we're in today, in the acceleration, say, of digitalization,
Yes.
it's something that is pushed toward us. And so instead of fighting it, my view is, how do you cope in that environment and protect yourself a little bit against it?
Correct.
And also leverage the benefit that comes with it, because there are tremendous benefits from all the changes we are seeing today. If I actually build on the COVID-19 crisis, when I started working 20 years ago, working from home was not an option. In fact, we wouldn't be able to interact as we're doing just now,
Yes.
with you in India, me in the UK, right? We are thousands of miles away of each other.
Correct.
That would not have been possible 20 years ago.
No.
The pandemic, the impact of the pandemic has been significantly reduced, at least from a social and economic standpoint, because of the progress we've made technologically speaking.
Right.
And so we need to realize that, right? And for me, those are very positive developments, but those are also development that needs to be a little bit controlled and very much understood. They also open a new frontier as well for people who want to do bad things, right? And we need to be clear about that. Cybersecurity is a real concern. In fact, we had that massive attack in the US that was announced earlier on this week. You see that now as a real occurrence, and it's not going to stop. So the way we act individually, the way we think about that environment that keeps changing, and how other people, perhaps less well-intended, could leverage that is critical for us as individual and as organization as well.
Indeed, sir. I think we all need to understand is that technology is getting advanced by the minute, not by the hour or the day. Emerging technologies such as machine learning and artificial intelligence show great promise in helping risk managers pinpoint a specific risk and develop faster response. So do you think these technologies can help the efforts on lower risk areas and help managers focus their energies on real threats to critical part of the organization?
Well, I think they can do actually both, what you mentioned, because in a way, machine learning and AI can deal and process information probably in a more effective way than we do, which in itself creates a risk, but it's part of evolution as well to an extent. If you look into the benefit of AI, right, the ability to detect cancer, for example, to diagnose cancer is massively improving now. And it's a large part due to machine learning and artificial intelligence. So if you just take in the medical space, the potential for saving life, improving the quality of all of our life is quite significant. From a social standpoint, from a technological standpoint, from an ecological standpoint, all of those aspects can be massively and positively impacted by machine learning and AI.
Right.
Take traffic optimization. Car traffic, depending on where you are. I've been in India multiple times. Sometimes it's a little bit chaos. You have cars everywhere. It's the same in London. It's the same in Paris, everywhere. Here, the potential for optimization and ecological benefits and environmental benefits is quite significant. It's going to take time. It is clearly already happening to an extent, but it's going to accelerate. And for me, it's not a bad thing. But we need to be very cognizant of how machine learning and AI works. And here we also had very bad stories around, if you take Amazon, not to name them, in the context of recruitment, for example, where the data they used to feed into this machine were biased, which led to having people being excluded not on the base that were not the right fit for the job, but based on the color of their skin. Right? And so those things, I think, are now very well understood. I think we still need to walk through them, because I don't think we are at a stage of maturity where we fully understand how to cater for them, but they are very much understood and they are being dealt with. and our knowledge and our understanding on how AI and machine learning is evolving will progress as well. So for me, we're probably more at the beginning of the journey than the end from that perspective.
Indeed, sir. I think again it was a very insightful answer from your side, and I think it's a kind of privilege today we got to hear all those things. You have actually mentioned how AI and machine learning are helping us in many different ways. So my next question to you is: organizations are still dealing with the effect of the pandemic, but most are beginning to plan for whatever business as usual will look like going forward.
Yeah.
Better risk management may not spot the big disruptive event as you have mentioned, but it can accelerate, shape a more effective organizational response to whatever waits for us. So, in your opinion, what kind of strategy and planning needed to deal organization in this fast-paced changing world?
I think it's it's a very broad question. It's very much multifaceted. If I start with people, right, because that's as you mentioned at the beginning, it's a passion of mine.
Yes.
The way we organize work for people in general is going to change. In fact, the pandemic has significantly accelerated the change in the notion of dynamic working, for example. It is critical for organizations to understand what it means to them and the strategic impact it can have, right? And if I look in the press today, in that space, you already have two camps, right? You have firms like Goldman Sachs and a few other financial organizations who said, we want all our staff back in the office. You have other organizations that are going down the path saying, we want to give more flexibility to our staff. We want to let them choose to an extent what they're going to do. Whether you're for one or the other, the reality is that that's going to create a very different offering for talent. And so if you think about people in that context and how do you attract talent then to your organization, the way you organize work is pretty much going to be part of the package going forward. And if you're more someone who needs to be in the office and enjoy that, perhaps you're going to go more toward Goldman Sachs. If you lack that flexibility and working from home, for example, you might not go there. You might go somewhere else. The strategic impact it has in terms of attracting talent and competing with other sectors such as tech companies is quite significant. So here, those type of things for me, from a risk standpoint, are clearly things we're looking at because they are paramount to the success of our business strategy. We cannot succeed if we don't have the right people. This is that simple in a way. So that people component is very important. The other aspect we are seeing, right, is, and again, in the cyber risk space, we've seen, and as a result of the digitalization and working from home, more and more dependency on technology.
Right.
Which in turn means we are more exposed as well. And the challenge with cyber is that usually we are as strong, or not usually, we are as strong as our weakest link. And we do not always know what it is, which is exactly why we ended up with that announcement earlier on this week and why we've seen all of the threats. And for me, having an understanding on how do we monitor an ever-changing environment? How do we understand how the vulnerabilities and the threats keep changing? Knowing that it just keeps accelerating and go faster and faster is critical, and two, making sure that we make the right provision to respond to that ever-changing environment and the pace of it as well. There's no, we've seen a problem, we're going to take 2 years to deal with it, because someone else is going to deal with it for you if you don't do it straight away. In that ability to respond, for me, is also critical in that context. And that's something that I see very much changing. And I suspect that organizations that succeed are the ones who are going to be the most acute at understanding that ever-changing environment and responding to it promptly.
Indeed. Sir, I'm sure in your many years of experience in this risk management, I'm sure you must have observed the failure of risk management. Sir, may I ask you please explain our viewers what is the most prominent reason for the failure of risk management?
Well, there are many, unfortunately, there are many examples. But I'll take one pertaining to finance, and I can perhaps build on another one as well elsewhere. So the 2008 crisis, right? The financial crisis in 2008 is a textbook example of risk management failure. And it's less about the risk management function itself. It is about more the culture around risk management. And if you take the financial crisis, right, it occurred because the overall environment around certain social class enable people to learn more and more money, right? There was a need for it. In fact, it was done, in my view, with also the political backing because it addressed the problem from a welfare perspective. But what we've done is to create significant vulnerabilities, both from a social and economic and financial perspective as a result. And what nobody realized, except a few exceptions, is that we had a single point of failure in the entire construct we were building. So in the financial industry, people were saying, well, we're issuing and lending as much as possible, but then we are spreading the risk through all of those very complex products across many players, so there won't be a problem. Except that nobody saw that all of those products were still vulnerable to one single factor. And when things started shifting, then everybody went into it. That's how Lehman Brothers, that's how Merrill Lynch, that's how AIG, and many, many other organizations went down. Because they were completely blind to the risks that were building up in the system. And equally important for me, there was a complete failure from a governance standpoint. So as all of them were at the checkbook out and were lending more money, from a strategic standpoint, the boards and the governance also failed to oversee what they were doing. And again, you cannot have proper risk management if you don't have proper governance, and especially at board level for companies, if the board are not effective, you can be sure you're going to have some problem. And some of the biggest bankruptcy in the space of financial industry were directly linked to this oversight and governance failure from my perspective. That was the case for Barings. That was the case for RBS. I used to work for Dexia. In many ways, it was the case there. So you can go through the list and you would find exactly the same problem to a large extent. So this failure from a risk and governance standpoint can lead to organizations disappearing overnight and can put clear systemic risk across the overall world as well, as we've experienced and to an extent are still recovering from.
Indeed, sir, I think you have taken the example of 2008 financial crisis, and I'm sure many of viewers, those who are actually wanted to listen what actually has happened and what are some of the drawbacks, they must have find this insightful you answers. And my next question to you is, let's talk about from the side of leadership perspective, as we have moved into this 21st year of this 21st century and passing through this very unprecedented kind of times. The way we do business has changed. We now operate in an environment that can be very aptly described as VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The pace of change is fast and getting faster. Organizations are flatter, customer demands are ever increasing, competition is global, and continuous disruption are now new normal. Sir, what do you believe? What is the needed to survive and thrive in such a VUCA world? What kind of leadership skill do we need?
That's my personal view, right? And I'm sure people will not necessarily agree or disagree with it. I believe in people, and I believe in empathetic leadership. That's not what we're seeing across, by the way, right? So I'm very lucky that I work for an empathetic leader, especially the CEO of Fidelity International is absolutely outstanding. But when I look across, in fact, even the companies I worked for, that has not always been the case. So empathetic leadership and putting people in the forefront of what we do for me is critical, because if we make our people succeed, then we will succeed as an organization. And that is about understanding what could impact them. We are not here to manage their life, but we're here to sometimes go through some difficult time as well, which is exactly what we've experienced over the past 18 months. A lot of people were personally impacted. Some people lost relatives, friends. Some people got sick. Some people are still recovering from it. Recognizing all of that is critical. And so in a world, in that world, my view is empathetic leader won, because they were the one who could drive the organization through and understood what was required to succeed in that context. Now it's paramount for me, but that's not sufficient. We need to be flexible and recognizing that the world we live in, and agile effectively, and the world we live in is changing all the time. The pace of change, to the point you made, is accelerating. And one of the core criteria I can see for very proficient leader is distinguishing, cutting through the noise effectively. Because one of the challenge as well is you get a lot of information. In fact, we're all bombarded with a lot of information. Some of it is news, some of it is just information, some of it is fake news, whatever that is. Understanding what matters to you and to your firm will determine, again, the success you have as a leader and your ability to create and adjust your vision.
Right.
And here, again, I'm lucky to work for someone who is in that space. I don't think that's the case across. And I can see some organizations are going to struggle with that. And in fact, some organizations are already struggling with it, and it's only going to get worse.
Yes. All right, sir. Again, it was a very wonderful answer, and I'm sure there's a lot more to learn from you, sir. And also, the things which you have told actually has impacted me, and I'm sure the viewers who are watching this session, they are surely going to learn from this as well. And I'm very sure about this, sir. But today I don't want to take too much of your time. So moving to my last question of this session, or rather, I'm just, what are some of the tips or advices would you like to give to young millennials?
For me, it's about be curious, be bold, and take the time to learn.
Yes.
Which is always a little bit of a challenge, right? And it's experience matters, and especially when it comes to learning how to resilient and how to develop emotional intelligence. Those things take time, and so take the time to do it right for yourself and then everybody else around. I think that's probably going to be my advice to you.
Right, it was a very wonderful advice, and also it was a kind of healthy conversation with you over the topic. Thank you so much, sir, for joining and giving your important time. We look forward to conduct more such session with you in future. Thank you, sir, for joining. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. My pleasure, and I hope that's very useful for everybody.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Of course it is. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
On the ground is where I stand. Never give up, that was always the plan. It's so cold outside, I'm alone, I'm alright. It's so cold outside, I'm alone.